How's it going, guys? Cracked Rack here, and today I have another irresponsible as fuck story for you all from yours truly. See, when I said that I've been fired from 8 different jobs in my life, I'm not lying or exaggerating. I've had a rough last decade, if I'm being quite honest. And today's video in particular is about the time that I got fired from Subway. Now, I'm sure a lot of you don't eat Subway because it's notoriously kind of a gross restaurant, and all of their food tastes exactly the same. But I worked there for about 3 months, and those 3 months were miserable. Now, I fucking despise fast food work with a passion. I genuinely think working in the fucking cartel would be less stressful. So this story takes place quite a few years ago when I was only about 16 years old. I had never had a job before, and I had just dropped out of high school because I'm a genius. And my parents were essentially giving me an ultimatum. Either I get a job, or I go to community college, or I get a girlfriend, or I get the fuck out and live somewhere else. So I chose to get a job. I was living in Billings, Montana at the time, which is a really shitty scumfuck town full of nothing but casinos and prostitutes. It's like one giant red light district. So the only place that was really hiring for anything serious was fast food, and the job I applied to in particular was a Subway inside of a Walmart. Said Walmart was notorious for its criminal activity and mass shooter scares, so that was cool. So a day after I applied, I got the call to do an interview. I went over there that day, interviewed, and pretty much got the job within 2 days, which would be one of the biggest mistakes Subway has ever made, aside from, you know, the Jared Fogle stuff. I'll skip to my first day. My first day there, I learned 2 lessons. Lesson 1 is that humanity is a disgusting, depraved, selfish species. Lesson 2 was that fast food work was soul-sucking and never even gave you a second for yourself. You ever hear the saying, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean? That's something you'll hear a lot in the fast food industry. So anyway, on my first day, I met my coworkers who were awful, if I'm being honest. You had this really fat lady there named Mandy who was really flirtatious and annoying and constantly bitching about this or that. Then you had my manager Cindy who was pretty hot, but on that same accord she was also a psycho bitch who had threatened to write me a referral for doing the littlest things. Like, she threatened to write me a referral because I put too many olives on a sandwich once. Cindy, if you're watching this, your hotness will not get you that far in this life. I also had a few other coworkers, but they were weird, antisocial, nerdy basement dwellers with pube mustaches, who I didn't really feel comfortable initiating conversation with. Now, if you saw my video on how I got fired from McDonald's, my Subway downfall wasn't much different. The first incident I had was on my 5th day. I was making a gross roast beef mustard piece of shit sandwich for some hot girl, and 16-year-old me wanted to impress her because
I was a cool Subway employee.
So in the middle of making her sandwich, I said really loudly, "Want some mayonnaise on this, bitch?" I wasn't calling her bitch, I was referring to the sandwich as a bitch, you know, in a cool way. Like when you say, you know, like, let's get out of this bitch, or let's go do this bitch, or let's blow this bitch. But the girl thought I was calling her a bitch, and the manager and everyone else in the area thought I had just loudly called this girl a bitch. So my manager was like,
"Get in my office now!"
And we had a really awkward 15-minute conversation about sexual harassment and shit, and essentially I got written up. The second incident was about 2 weeks later, and this was my final incident at this location. I'll explain in a minute. Essentially, when Subway's closed, you have to take out all those little food trays, wash them, fill them with the next day's supply of food, then store them in the cooler. My manager told me to do just that, but it was my first time and she didn't show me how to do it properly. So when I filled them with food, I just started stacking them on top of each other in the cooler like some sort of fucked up Jenga game. You're probably not gonna believe me when I say this, but my manager went to double check on my work, opened the cooler, and every single tray I had stacked fell on top of her and spilled tons of condiments and pickles and shit all over her face. There was definitely a good splat of mustard on her tits. Now, she was furious with me, but I think she thought I was retarded because she was faking a smile and being super nice to me after this as if I was like a toddler. Long story short, she was about to fire me, but I revealed that night that I was actually going to be moving to a smaller town with my parents in 2 days, so she offered to transfer me to that small town Subway to work there. So instead of firing me, she just got me the fuck out of her hair and put me in someone else's. Fast forward a week later, I'm working at this small town Subway, and there's really only 4 people working there. There was the boss, who was this really creepy old divorced guy whose daughter threatened to shoot up a school, so that was that guy's reputation. Then the other 3 dudes were just redneck dumb shits in their late teens that didn't really care about anything. Those guys were like 17, and I'm pretty sure they all had children, to give you an idea. And working here was even worse than the other place, because here there weren't any hot chicks or any cool personalities or anything. It was just really old, angry Republicans who all wanted the exact same type of roast beef sandwich. There were also a lot of gay old swinger men who would constantly hit on me, which was extremely uncomfortable because I was like 16 and they were like 50. Now, how I got fired from this place is a bit anticlimactic. See, the owner would give me, at 16, a bunch of cigarettes to smoke in the back because he always had like a whole bunch of them. And when he gave me my break, instead of taking like 15 minutes, which I was supposed to do, I'd take like 45-minute smoke breaks, where I'd smoke like 5 cigarettes at a time and play on my phone. I had given up on my job at this point and didn't really care about the consequences. I was also late to work by like 10 minutes every single day without fail. I don't think I was ever on time to work once. So eventually one day I was serving this really old lady a sandwich and she was going on a rant about how responsible I was for having a job at that age. And pretty much right when she was telling me this, my boss called me into his office and loudly fired me, like screaming at me. And I had to do the walk of shame out of that subway without my uniform on, in front of that lady whose sandwich I was still in the process of making. So yeah, that's my story of how I got fired from Subway. On another note, before I end this video, please consider joining my Discord server. It's essentially like 4chan without all the creepy degenerate shit, like there's no racism or anything like that. But you can make edgy jokes and stuff and just have a goofy fun time with other users. Link in description.